What is your emergency?
It's Julia! She's in the water! Reef, the alligator, is pulling her down!
You're watching Animals Quest, where the most shocking animal encounters are brought to life. The horrifying last swim of Julia Banks. Her pet gator dragged her under. This is the story of Julia Banks and the bond that turned fatal. Julia Banks was not like anyone else in Clearwater Springs, Florida. Where neighbors kept cats or dogs, Julia raised something far more dangerous, an American alligator named Reef. She had rescued him as a hatchling, no longer than her forearm. She often told friends that she saw something special in him. "He's gentle," she insisted. "He knows me." Through old photographs, the story unfolded. Julia smiling at a tiny reptile resting in her palm. Later, feeding him in a baby pool. And as the years passed, the hatchling became a giant. 14 feet long, armored in muscle, with eyes that glowed like ancient amber beneath the sun. Neighbors watched uneasily. They whispered across fences, worried that Reef's instincts might one day outweigh Julia's trust. "You can't train out the wild," one man muttered, shaking his head. But Julia believed otherwise. She believed love could tame instinct. By her mid-30s, Julia's life revolved around Reef. She built an enclosure behind her home, turning her swimming pool into a murky lagoon where he spent his days. She brought him fish, chicken, sometimes entire cuts of meat, lowering them into the water with steady hands. Children riding bikes would stop near her fence, pressing their faces to the wood slats, hoping to glimpse the monster inside. Sometimes they saw him, floating perfectly still, like a log. Other times, nothing but the shimmer of dark water. Julia would smile and wave. "Don't be afraid," she told them. "He's calmer than he looks." But behind her gentle words, there was always risk. Experts often warn that reptiles do not bond the way dogs or cats do. They tolerate, they wait, they watch. And Reef was always watching. For years, Julia's friends admired her boldness, but they worried. On social media, one post captured the debate. A blurry photo of Reef's massive body surfaced online, captioned, "That's in a backyard? In a pool? Crazy." Comments flooded in. "That's not a pet, that's a predator. One day she's gonna regret this. People shouldn't play God." Julia ignored the noise. She replied once, "He's family. He'd never hurt me." Those words would come back to haunt her. On summer evenings, the cicadas hummed, and Julia would sit by the pool, dangling her legs just above the surface. Reef floated near, silent, his eyes breaking the water like coins of gold. She found peace in his presence. Yet the neighbors grew more uneasy with each passing year. Some filed quiet complaints, asking officials how such an animal could be kept under state approvals. Wildlife officers visited once, noting the reinforced fencing and warning Julia to exercise caution. An officer's words lingered. "Remember, he's not tame. He's just waiting." Still, Julia believed she was different. She had raised him. She trusted him. And for a long time that trust held. Until one quiet morning, when still water would turn red. The year before the tragedy, Julia's story was already well known in Clearwater Springs. Reef was famous, though most locals never said his name without lowering their voices. One afternoon, the county sheriff's department received yet another call from a concerned neighbor. "There's an alligator in her pool," the caller said flatly. "I don't care if she raised it. That thing doesn't belong in a neighborhood." When officers visited, they found Julia calm, smiling, and welcoming. She showed them the reinforced fencing, the locked gates, the feeding logs she kept as proof of Reef's care. On paper, she had the approvals to keep him, but paperwork never changes biology. Wildlife officer Dean Harrell remembered that day vividly. She was confident, almost too confident, he later recalled. "We reminded her, alligators don't lose instinct. They don't become pets. They're predators, always." Julia listened politely, nodded, and walked them back to their trucks. As they drove away, Reef floated near the surface, motionless but aware. His yellow eyes followed the movement of every human shape that passed by. Online, the debate grew louder. Videos Julia posted of Reef taking food from her hand went viral. One clip showing her brushing algae from his armored back, drew thousands of comments. Incredible bond. This is insane. She's gonna get killed. That thing's just biding time. Some admired her bravery. Others condemned her recklessness. Julia never argued. She only wrote once, under a photo of Reef basking in the sun, "He's my piece. People don't understand." Her friends noticed changes too. Reef was growing restless. He lunged more during feeding. His tail slapped harder against the water, echoing through the neighborhood like a warning drum. But Julia brushed it off. "He's just energetic," she told her sister during one visit. "He gets excited when he sees me. That's all." Her sister wasn't convinced. She stared at the gator's massive jaws, lined with dozens of conical teeth. "One day," she whispered, "you'll misread him, and that will be it." Summer turned to fall, then winter, and Reef only grew larger. 14 feet from snout to tail, nearly 900 pounds of reptilian power. He could crush bones in seconds. Yet Julia still swam in the pool with him sometimes, gliding through the water as his scaled body drifted near. To her, it was harmony. To others, it was a countdown. One night, a storm swept across Clearwater Springs. A neighbor out checking his fence heard something eerie through the rain. A low rumble, almost like thunder, but coming from Julia's backyard. It was Reef, bellowing, a deep, guttural call that shook the wet air. In the dark, the man shivered. He knew what it meant. The gator wasn't tame. He was announcing territory, and that territory included Julia's pool. The day began quietly, too quietly. Julia stepped into her backyard, the Florida sun already bright against the water. The pool shimmered with a green film of algae. Somewhere beneath it, Reef rested. She carried a bucket of food, raw cuts of meat wrapped in butcher paper. As she always did, Julia hummed softly as she walked to the edge. Reef's head surfaced slowly, nostrils breaking first, then eyes, then the ridged snout. Julia smiled. "Morning, boy." The neighborhood was still. Children hadn't come out yet. The cicadas were only beginning their chorus. But the silence was heavy, as though the air itself sensed what Julia did not. She crouched, lowering the meat into the water. Reef slid forward, his jaws opening with deceptive grace. With one snap, the food was gone. Julia laughed, brushing her hand across the water's surface. But today, Reef didn't retreat. He stayed, still, watching. Across the fence, a neighbor paused while watering her plants. She noticed the unusual quiet. Normally, Julia spoke to Reef, sometimes even laughed. But this morning, there was only silence and the low ripple of water. She stepped closer, peering through the slats, her unease growing. Inside the yard, Reef began circling slowly, his eyes fixed on Julia. She thought it was affection, but to the reptile it was something older, something written in blood and instinct. Wildlife experts warn of this moment. Alligators don't bond, they associate. And when association blurs, instinct wins. Julia never saw the shift. To her, Reef was calm, familiar. But the air told another story. The birds had gone silent. Even the insects paused. The pool had become a trap. It happened in a heartbeat. Julia sat on the pool's edge, legs dangling in the water. Reef floated near, half submerged, his ridged back glistening under the sun. For a moment, the scene looked serene. Then Reef lunged. Water exploded upward. His jaws clamped around Julia's leg with bone-crushing force. Her scream split the air, piercing through the still morning. The neighbor dropped her watering can, heart racing, unable to move. Julia's hands clawed at the concrete edge, desperate to hold on. The surface beneath her fingers scraped raw. "Reef, no!" she cried, her voice cracking. But Reef's instincts had taken over. He jerked once, twice, and then pulled her into the water. The pool that once held laughter now boiled with chaos. Reef thrashed violently, dragging Julia under, her arms flailing above the surface before disappearing into the churn. The neighbor screamed for help, fumbling for her phone. Dialing 911, her words came out fractured, panicked. "The gator! Her gator! He's got her! He's killing her!" From another yard, a man rushed to the fence, eyes wide in horror. He could only watch, helpless, as the water reddened. Experts call it the death roll. An alligator clamps down, then spins with terrifying speed, disorienting and drowning its prey. Reef rolled again and again, the pool churning into froth. Julia surfaced once, gasping, her hands slapping the water as if reaching for air, for life. Then she was gone again. Neighbors shouted, voices colliding with the sound of thrashing water. Someone banged on Julia's front door. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, still too far away. And in the backyard, Reef continued his role. When rescue arrived, it was already too late. Paramedics rushed through the gate, officers shouting commands, weapons drawn but hesitant. The scene before them was chaos and silence combined. The pool water stained, the reptile hovering like a shadow just beneath. A deputy fired a warning shot into the air. Reef didn't flinch. He stayed with his hold, his massive tail swaying slowly in the water. One rescuer shouted, "We need eyes on her. Pull him out." But no one dared enter. The risk was too great. Neighbors crowded the fence line, some crying, some unable to look away. A child buried her face into her mother's side, trembling. At last, Reef slid to the far end of the pool, releasing his hold. Julia's body surfaced, still and broken, drifting among ripples. Officers rushed in, pulling her to the concrete deck, medics already kneeling beside her. They worked frantically, compressions, oxygen, desperate pleas, but the silence in the backyard told its own story. "She's gone," one whispered. The neighbor who had first called 911 fell to her knees, sobbing. She would later tell reporters, "I heard her scream. I'll never forget that sound." And Reef? He floated quietly, eyes above the surface, unblinking, as if nothing had happened. The predator had claimed his place once more. The backyard filled with sirens flashing red and blue against the pale Florida sky. Officers moved in formation, rifles aimed at the pool, while paramedics worked frantically on the concrete deck. "Stay with us, Julia," one medic urged, his voice steady despite the urgency. But Julia's body remained still. Neighbors clung to one another, watching the scene unfold with horrified disbelief. For years they had whispered warnings, but none had truly believed the day would come. Now it had. Reef lingered in the water, massive head breaking the surface, just enough to see. His amber eyes glowed like ancient coins, calm and unbothered. To him, this was instinct fulfilled. To the humans around him, it was terror made real. An officer lowered his weapon, shaking his head. "We can't fire with them working on her. Too much risk." Instead, the pool became a standoff. Life against death. Science against instinct. And in that standoff, silence pressed heavier than the sirens. Finally, a paramedic stopped compressions. His voice was quiet, respectful. "Time of death." The words rippled across the yard like a stone across still water. Julia Banks was gone. Somewhere beyond the fence, a child began to cry. The question now was simple, but heavy. What would happen to Reef? Wildlife officers arrived on scene within the hour, their uniforms damp with sweat as they conferred with deputies. Reef's body shifted under the green film of water, enormous and waiting. One officer, grim-faced, spoke plainly. "We can't relocate him. He's imprinted on this enclosure. He's dangerous. He'll have to be put down." The words fell like a gavel. Some neighbors felt relief. Others felt sorrow, even pity for the animal. After all, Reef was only doing what nature had designed him to do. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't malicious. He was an alligator. Still, the decision was clear. That afternoon, under the authority of the state, wildlife officers subdued Reef and removed him from Julia's pool. Witnesses said he fought fiercely, thrashing with raw power until the tranquilizers took effect. For the first time in nearly 15 years, Julia's backyard was silent. On social media, the news spread like wildfire. The gator finally snapped. She should have listened. R.I.P. Julia. But why keep a predator like that? Some blamed Julia. Others mourned her. Many mourned both. But the truth was undeniable. Reef had never changed. He had only grown. In the days that followed, Clearwater Springs became a town in mourning. Julia's friends organized a vigil outside her home. Neighbors gathered with candles, setting them along the fence line that had once separated them from Reef. Flowers piled against the gate. Handwritten notes fluttered in the breeze. "She was kind," one woman said through tears. "She believed in love, even when the rest of us didn't." Local news crews captured the scene, their cameras sweeping across faces illuminated by candlelight. In the footage, a small child placed a stuffed animal on the ground, an alligator toy, its button eyes glistening. The moment was haunting. For many, the vigil was not only about Julia, but about a lesson. People whispered about the risks of keeping wild animals, about the thin line between affection and instinct. The pastor who spoke that evening summed it up simply. She gave her heart to something that could never give it back. The crowd stood in silence, heads bowed. Only the hum of insects filled the night. In the aftermath, experts across the country weighed in on Julia's tragedy. Dr. Elaine Morris, a herpetologist, put it bluntly during a televised interview. Alligators are not pets. They can't be domesticated. People mistake tolerance for affection, but these animals are programmed for survival, not companionship. Other voices echoed the sentiment. Wildlife rescue groups reminded the public of cases where lions, tigers, even chimpanzees had turned on their owners. It always ends the same, one advocate said, with grief for the human and for the animal that pays the price. But some pushed back, insisting Julia's story was not one of recklessness, but of love taken too far. She cared for him more than herself, a family friend explained. She believed she could bridge that gap, and maybe that belief says something about hope, even if it cost her everything. The debate raged online. Was Julia brave or foolish? Visionary or blinded by her own heart? In truth, she was human. And humans, unlike gators, live in contradictions. The house on Willow Creek Lane stands quieter now. The gate is locked. The pool is drained. No sound of splashing water or low reptilian bellows, only the rustle of wind through overgrown grass. An empty chair sits by the poolside, sun-bleached and abandoned. A skimmer leans against the wall, its handle rusting. These are the relics of Julia's life, symbols of a bond that could not last. For Clearwater Springs, the memory remains vivid. At every cookout, at every church gathering, someone inevitably mentions Julia Banks. Her name has become a story, a warning, and a lesson. The lesson is simple. Wild animals remain wild. Love cannot undo instinct. Julia believed Reef was different. She believed he was family, and in a way he was. But family requires trust, and trust requires choice. Reef never had that choice. He was what he had always been. In the final news broadcast covering the tragedy, the anchor's voice carried the message home. Julia Banks loved her alligator as if he were human. But in the end, instinct claimed the bond. Let this remind us all. Wild predators belong in the wild. If this story moved you, share it. Subscribe to Animals Quest for more true survival stories that must be remembered. And remember, wild animals are not pets.